In our first session, we explored a biblical theology of emotions at their best and at their worst. And in our second session, we're going to explore the 5 marks of the emotional life you're made for that can help you discover a next step you can take in your emotional life starting this week. First mark is this, is that you've explored your emotional history. You've explored your emotional history. Do you know what emotional baggage, both good and bad, that you're bringing with you from your family of origin and past life experiences into your present experiences and present relationships? Pete Scazzero says this famous phrase. He says, Jesus might live in your heart, but grandpa lives in your bones. He's talking about what's called your family of origin and what people call the multi-generational transmission process. But I like his phrasing a little bit better. If you start with your grandparents and you study your family, you'll often find both healthy and unhealthy emotional patterns that it feels like you have been blessed with or cursed with. But often we're completely unaware. For example, if you want to, just read the book of Genesis and pay attention to the patterns that start all the way back with Adam and Eve, move through Cain and Abel, then eventually into Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. One tool that can help you do this is something called the Genogram, which is a tool that helps you name some consistent themes and patterns across multiple generations in your family. Pete Scazzero has a bunch of great resources on this. Even Jesus had a family of origin, as we'll talk about in the relational life you're made for. But you also have a lifetime of experiences within and beyond your family of origin that are shaping your emotional life in positive and negative ways as well, like trauma and wounds. And the more you've explored those experiences, the better you will be able to notice when you are feeling something in the present that might be connected to something in the past. One tool that I found helpful for doing this is something called a sticky note timeline, which helps you name some of the key experiences that have shaped you positively and negatively into who you are. And Terry Walling has some great resources that can help you do that if you want. The second mark is you're aware of your emotional tendencies. My emotional tendencies are not necessarily the same as yours. Maybe you're prone to anxiety or quick to anger or struggle with shame. These things are connected to your emotional history, your gender, your generational cohort, and biological inclinations. Psychiatrist Leonard Mlodinow calls this your emotional profile. And he says it's a description of what it takes to trigger each particular emotion, how swiftly it builds, how intense it tends to be, and how long it generally takes to dissipate. What emotions are you most prone to most often? What tends to trigger these emotions for you, if you know? How fast do these emotions accelerate? What does it take for them to go away? So for example, if you struggle with anxiety, do you know what triggers it? How fast does it accelerate? How long does it take to dissipate? The key, though, that researchers are beginning to discover is that you're not stuck in whatever emotional tendencies you have. Once you're aware of them, there's plenty of work that can now be done to help you navigate them. The third mark is you're developing your emotional agility. Popularized by Harvard psychologist Susan David, it's about your ability to navigate different emotions that you feel in healthier ways. Because as Dallas Willard says, feelings are, with a few exceptions, good servants, but they are disastrous masters. Rather than being enslaved to your emotions, it's about starting to make your emotions serve you. And if you don't know where to start, I suggest starting with a simple 5-stage progression from Jenny Allen in her book, Untangle Your Emotions. It's so helpful for engaging with your emotions in healthy ways, and you've actually already started using it in this unit. The 5 steps are notice, name, feel, share, and choose. First, notice, and you've already done this. Instead of ignoring emotions, slow down and notice. It can be as simple as saying, am I feeling okay or not okay? And then take a moment to consider how long you felt that way, for a day, for a decade, and where is your body carrying that emotion? Then name. Try to get more specific and name what you're feeling. And as some have said, you can tame what you can name. And research shows that naming emotions is actually linked with fewer doctor appointments and medications and also better social functioning. I have a chart, for example, that we use with our children. It's pinned outside of their rooms. And when they're having an emotional moment, sometimes when we can get it together, we walk over to the chart and we say, what are you feeling? Let's get specific. And it's often just naming it can often help us a lot. Third step is to feel. You have to sometimes let the feeling run its course. That's not the same as acting on it or following its lead. It's possible to feel a feeling fully and not sin as a result. So for example, are you feeling sad? Sometimes you just got to let the tears flow. Or are you angry? Sometimes you just need to go punch a punching bag or maybe just knead some dough, and that will let that feeling dissipate. Next is to share. Find a healthy community that's safe to share what you're feeling with so that you're not carrying it alone. As Galatians chapter 6, verse 2 says, carry one another's burdens. In this way you fulfill the law of Christ. Maybe it's a group text, a small group, a huddle, or something like that. And then finally, choose. Choose what you're going to do with the feeling. So for example, with anger, in your anger, do not sin. You might feel angry with your kids, but you can make the choice not to yell. As part of working through this framework for navigating emotions, one helpful practice is working your way through the book of Psalms. Everything you've ever felt can be prayed, and the Psalms are proof of that. Even wanting your enemies dead is in the Psalms. And so as you spend time in the Psalms, you'll find new ways to talk about your feelings with God. Mark number 4 is you're practicing emotional compassion. This is how we engage with other people's emotions when they show up in our lives. Your spouse, your kids, your friends, your coworkers, people at church. And often when we experience other people's emotions, we respond in one of two ways. Either we react to what they're feeling by letting their feelings dictate our feelings, failing to separate ourselves, or we minimize their feelings and we tell them why, all the reasons why they shouldn't be feeling that without ever taking a moment to try to understand what they're going through. But there's a better way. People who are living the emotional lives that they're made for are what's called differentiated. They know where they end and someone else begins. You can listen to what they're feeling without letting their feelings overtake you. Jesus was a master of this. Once you do that, you're able to practice true compassion, which isn't the same as agreeing with everything that someone is feeling or saying. Before anything else, is simply entering into the feeling with the person through careful listening and good questions and understanding, making sure that they feel heard and understood first and foremost. And then, as you're invited to do so, sometimes speaking truth into what they're feeling, and as you're feeling led, sometimes taking action. That's what Jesus did. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul writes that when one part of the body suffers, the whole body suffers. Or Romans chapter 12, verse 15, he writes, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. That's a picture of this in practice. Mark 5, you're pursuing emotional healing. When Jesus came proclaiming the arrival of the life you're made for in his kingdom, he demonstrated its arrival how? Through healing the sick. That's not just about physical healing, that's about emotional healing as well. Some of you have deep wounds that you've been carrying your whole life. Some of you are feeling stuck in clinical patterns of anxiety and depression. And others of you can't break free from emotionally destructive cycles in your life. Jesus is inviting you to reach out to him for healing. It might look like praying for emotional healing in an area of your life or receiving prayer for it, inviting the Holy Spirit to minister to your soul. I have seen so many people experience breakthrough in prayer. But it might also look like seeking good professional Christian counseling. I've done this. And sometimes based on your own discernment with a doctor, it might even look like something else as well. It's a both and. No matter what though, we are invited to pursue emotional healing as we follow Jesus. Whether that healing comes in an instant, whether it lingers over time as it draws us toward Jesus, or whether it's just healed when Jesus returns. As an adult, I've discovered that I'm easily prone to anxiety. But Jesus has met me in the midst of that. And it hasn't gone away, but through prayer and counseling, he has helped me lean into his presence and grow in my emotional agility and compassion toward others. I am by no means free of it, but I am following him right in the midst of it into the emotional life that I'm made for. Jesus had an emotional life, and so do you. And just like the other areas of the life you're made for, following Jesus into your emotional life is a lifelong journey. Jenny Allen talks about what her counselor said to her once when she was feeling frustrated with how long it was taking to get emotionally healthy. He said, "How long did it take to get to the emotional state you're in?" And she said, "About 40 years. So then he said, "Yeah, it's going to take you a minute to get out." How do you follow Jesus into the emotional life you're made for? One step at a time. Yes, it's a lifelong journey, but it starts with one step. So what's one step you can take toward the emotional life you're made for starting this week? As Hebrews 4:15-16 says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in every way as we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let us approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in time of need. Jesus has felt what you felt, but without sin, and he wants to meet you in whatever you're feeling today.